ahead and turn your microphone on, and I'll do a proper introduction here of our friend Nathan Shafer. Nathan, just a couple weeks ago, was at the Denver Comic Con. This is the second time that he and his friend Len Zelelniak. That's it. Zelelniak. That's him. That's the guy. It's the second time that they've been invited down to talk to the Denver Comic Con, and they had a great crowd down there. So this is also the second time now that we're going to be hearing something about comics and the philosophical themes that may or may not underpin what those comics are being written about. So thank you all for coming, and without further ado, Mr. Nathan Shafer.
Thank you, sir. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I am something of a maven of pop culture, and some of you who have heard me talk before, my name is Nathan Shafer. You know that this is kind of my gig, the intersection of political ideas, philosophical ideas, and the way that those ideas tend to emerge in pop culture. And of late, comic books and superheroes have been sort of a big theme. Now, last year, Len and I went to Denver Comic Con, and we presented a panel titled Gods Among Men, Radical Individualism in Comics. And it went very well. Thus, we decided that this year we were going to do this panel again, only we were going to alter the theme. And thus we have Gods and Demons, the nature of villainy in comics. That's part one. Part two. The last few weeks, last several weeks, have seen some really interesting events and turnabouts in the world of popular culture, and especially geek culture, that I think have some bearing. So I'm still going to present to you what Len and I did at Comic-Con. I'm going to do my best to cover Len's side of things, but I want to put this in a context for you. And I want to start off with what I think is a fairly important idea to get under your belt. Now, as I said, my bailiwick is pop culture, and 2 years ago, here at Liberty on the Rocks, I presented Breaking Down the Pop Culture Wall. And my idea there, my central thesis, is basically that in order to talk to people about politics and ideas, you have to meet them where they're coming from. And with most people, that's popular culture, movies, music, television. We don't get anywhere by ignoring the things that move people to great emotion, even to passion. And in our modern culture, it's the movies that they watch, it's the TV shows that they watch, it's huge business. Well, I have an extension of that idea tonight, and that is popular culture is geek culture. Geek culture is popular culture. And this is true in a very large way, and I'm going to make that point clear. Anybody know what the current top-grossing movie at the box office is? Avengers, Age of Ultron. Very good. Do you know what the top-grossing movie at the box office was last year? American Sniper. But we're going to come back to that. Not a geek movie. I'm going to come back to that point. The year before, the top-grossing movie at the box office was Catching Fire, the second movie in the Hunger Games. Science fiction, futuristic science fiction. The year before that, it was the first Avengers movie. The year before that, it was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Before that, Toy Story 3. Before that, Avatar, The Dark Knight, Spider-Man 3. Ugh, horrible movie. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Dead Man's Chest. Revenge of the Sith, the third Star Trek prequel. Shrek 2, Return of the King. Spider-Man, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The Grinch, The Phantom Menace. Oh, I missed Return of the King in there, the third Lord of the Rings movie. The Phantom Menace. Saving Private Ryan, 1998. You have to go back 17 years to find a top-grossing movie other than American Sniper last year that wasn't in the realm of fantasy, science fiction, superheroes. 17 years. Perhaps coincidentally, the same amount of time it's been since there was any increase in global warming. I think that's a coincidence. Now, what about American Sniper? Well, yes, last year, American Sniper, not a geek movie, was the top-grossing movie. But what came after that last year? Well, the number 2 movie was The Hunger Games Mockingjay, Part 1. After that, we had Guardians of the Galaxy, another sci-fi superhero movie. We had Captain America, The Winter Soldier, the Lego Movie, The Hobbit, Battle of the Five Armies, Transformers, Age of Extinction, Maleficent, taking the old Disney villain and turning her into a hero. X-Men Days of Future Past. Big Hero 6. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Godzilla. And down at number 14, once again, we have 22 Jump Street, a non-geek movie. You look at television, you look at movies, you look at bookstores. Have you ever visited the science fiction area of Barnes & Noble? It's huge, and that's not even including the comic books, the graphic novels, the manga, the toys, the collectibles from all of these geek movies. Popular culture is geek culture these days. It is inescapable. And therefore, two things. I'm getting there. Number one, if we are going to talk to people where they live, culturally speaking, we're going to talk about geek culture. We're going to approach that. Number two, we've already been beaten there. And this is where I want to bring you some reports from the front lines of the pop culture wars, especially with regards to geek culture. Anybody here watch Game of Thrones? Anybody here watch Game of Thrones who is not caught up on the current season? Yeah. Am I going to spoil anything?
Yeah, don't say nothing.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk in...
Why don't you leave the room for about 5 minutes?
Okay.
You people and your lack of commitment.
For those of you who don't know, Game of Thrones is a very, very popular television series on HBO. It's got 10 episodes a season, one season a year. So it's coming at us in very small increments and very painful to wait for. Very, very popular. Very, very violent. If you ever decide to watch Game of Thrones, don't get attached to any particular characters. Because chances are very good something bad is going to happen to any characters you get attached to. And any characters you start to really hate, chances are nothing bad will ever happen to them. It's a very dark series. In a recent episode of Game of Thrones, a particular female character ran into a sexual assault. And there was an enormous backlash online. On a lot of websites, I'm going to pick out just one. There is a website called The Mary Sue. It caters in particular to female geeks, female nerds, girls who like superheroes and science fiction and whatnot. And they wrote, "The Mary Sue staff and I felt the need to have a serious discussion after the season 4 episode Breaker of Chains. As you may recall, a scene between two characters, which was seen by many as consensual in the books, was seen as quite the opposite by many when it was adapted to screen. The consensus from us at that time was that, though we wished the scene hadn't happened, we were going to continue to watch. But we were not going to let the creators off the hook. Many felt differently, and that scene was the last straw for them." And goes on basically to say that we are no longer going to support this series. And this has been a widespread sentiment. Why? Because a female character was raped. Well, we can all get behind that, right? That's a pretty horrible thing. Something even more horrible by my lights happened in the episode that aired last night. And along the way, we have seen all of these male characters killed, butchered, tortured. One character has had pieces of skin peeled off. Horrific. Where's the outrage? Where's the shock? This is being driven by a particular social agenda. There's one example. Let me give you another example. Who here has heard of Gamergate? How many people have heard of it but don't really know what it is? Gamergate. Gamergate is a controversy that's going on in the world of video games. It's long and convoluted. Long story short, there is a cadre of what are termed social justice warriors, people who break left politically, who have taken control of a lot of the magazines, the journals, the publications that review video games. And they have made it a practice to give horrible reviews to games that do not tell a socially correct message, and to boost games, however lame, however unpopular amongst the buying public, that give the correct social justice message. Well, a bunch of gamers online started to take offense at this, started flaming, it's basically posting very ugly things about each other. It got very ugly very quickly. It has turned into everybody who opposes the social justice warriors in gaming media are Nazis, racist, homophobic, misogynist, the whole litany. We've got some great voices on our side. There's an actor named Adam Baldwin, very big in geek culture. He was on a popular show called Firefly. He's been in several movies. He is on our side, and he puts himself out there, and he gets roasted online. That's Gamergate. Anybody know what a sad puppy is? Now, there is an award in science fiction called the Hugo Award. It's been given for years. Some of the greatest names in science fiction writing, Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, have won Hugo Awards. It's awarded by popular vote at a convention every year. And of late, people started to notice that the same people and the same kinds of writing kept getting awards. What kind of writing is that? Well, not necessarily good, entertaining science fiction, but science fiction that told the correct social justice messages. There's a writer named Larry Correia. He is a former gun shop owner. And then he went on to start writing, and he got nominated for an award called the Campbell Award, Best New Writer in Science Fiction. Larry, because of his past pushing for gun rights, was not at all surprised when not only did he not win the award, that was a foregone conclusion, but also at the convention, he was meeting people. He had people he would approach, they would huff very loudly and walk away, whispers of Nazi and fascist and all of this ugliness. And he realized that the whole award system was rigged. So 3-4 years ago, he decided to do something about it. He got something that he believed was good writing, but not from one of the correct authors, nominated. It was, of course, slammed down. Last year was Sad Puppies 2. They decided, well, this year we're going to make it really obvious. And so they got a few such works on the ballot. And the narrative being, well, of course these guys are going to get shot down. And of course they did. This year they decided, well, we're going to make this really obvious. They got the whole ballot, top to bottom, stocked with writers that write entertaining fiction as opposed to message fiction. This has turned really ugly. And the name of the group is Sad Puppies. Why? Because message fiction makes puppies sad. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And now there is talk of the voting public for the Hugo Awards going with what's called no voting. Instead of voting for one of the options in a given category, you vote no vote. And if there's a majority no votes for the category, nobody gets the award. It's the nuclear option. It's gotten really ugly. This is what's going on. And the latest from this came from Denver Comic-Con. Now, as I said, my friend Lynn and I, here it is. My friend Lynn and I, we gave a panel, the purpose of which was to draw some connecting lines between the ideas and the stories and the characters that you see presented in superhero comics and ideas of individualism, which is the philosophic root of libertarianism, conservatism, anarcho-capitalism, basically the group of philosophies that bring us all here. But we wanted to be really subtle about it because we knew that the convention organizers of things like Denver Comic-Con have drifted very far left. How far left? Let me give you a list of some of the other panels that were going on that weekend. We had crossplay, gender bending, and the art of cross-gender costuming. So, Joker is a guy, you're a girl, you go dressed as a female Joker. There's a character paired up with the Joker called Harlequin. You're a guy, you want to go dressed as Harlequin, so you do a gender bending. There's a panel on that. Beyond Bechdel, queer femmes and women in comics. Death of the Spirit, Native Americans, negative stereotypes, and how we affect change. Anybody notice some coded language? Is there discrimination in pop culture? What do you think the answer was? Writing LGBT characters. Coming out of the costume, comics and sexual identity, and they had some subtopics here. Queer visibility or queer baiting. Does Marvel's Deadpool cross the line? Welcome to the jungle, LGBT representation, abnormal sexuality, and fragmented paranoia in Alan Moore's Watchmen. And Don't Get Gay, an examination of Greek manhood through Batman and Robin. We're not done. From Muggles to Ms. Marvel, minority representations in pop culture. And I wanted to read you a little bit of the description here. From Thor's newest incarnation. Did you know that Thor, the mighty Thor, is now a girl? They made the character female. From Thor's newest incarnation, Stephanie Brown's Batgirl, who is lesbian, and Kamala Khan to Spider-Man and the new Captain America, more diverse portrayals are beginning to emerge. What remains, though, is a substantial paradigm shift to the extent that these positive characters that are not part of the racial, gendered, heteronormative hegemony, there's some words, are so few and far between that a substantial portion of their influence can be addressed so briefly as it will be here. In other words, we've got these characters who are gay, queer, etc., but there's not enough of them. Okay. Harassment happens. About harassment if you go to do what's called cosplay. Cosplay is you go to a convention like this, dressed as your favorite superhero, video game character, etc. And if you're female and you go dressed as one of these characters, a lot of times the outfits are very, very sexy, very revealing. So we have a panel called Harassment Happens. Trans and genderqueer representation in comics. I'm just going to let that one sit there. Cosplay considered gendered texts and the problems of fan performance. Now this one's a little, so let me read you the description. A discussion of the way people, particularly women, use cosplay as a way to make meaning. A consideration of what happens when that meaning is found to be demeaning and some of the consequences female cosplayers are often subjected to. We had Level Up, Queer Dystopia by Sci-Fi Compelling Homos. I'm not kidding, that's a panel title. And Overcoming Objectification in Science Fiction and Comics. There was another one that I could not find. I was trying to dig it, but I remember seeing it in the printed program about using Muppets to explore issues of queer diversity. I'm not kidding. So there's a lot of this stuff at Denver Comic-Con. And don't think that Denver Comic-Con is the only thing there. So there's all of this on the one side. And then on the other side, within the middle, of course, there's just how to make your own costume, how to write your own comic book, how to write good fiction. So just sort of the intermediate nuts and bolts, no particular message. And then there's Len and me over here on the lonely right. And that's it. Now, that might lead you to think that, well, geek fandom is irretrievable. Not one bit. There were 170 seats in that room, and we had people telling us that people had to leave because they couldn't find a seat. Generally speaking, with these things, there's some attrition as the whole program goes through. We had a small handful, less than 10 people, get up and leave. Everybody else stayed. There was a lively discussion that went on. We ran right up against the time limit. People weren't eager to go. We had to just kind of say, well, that's all of our time. It was brilliant. On so many levels, there are tons of people who want to hear the kind of messages that we have to give, especially if they can be connected up with the entertainment that they enjoy, the characters that speak to them, the stories that involve them. But we've got to make the effort. That's the point. And just to take this back to the landscape that I was describing. So we have all these controversies about Game of Thrones and science fiction awards. Well, immediately after, I think the next day, we started noticing stories online about a panel at Denver Comic-Con and a whole bunch of complaining from a certain quarter about this particular panel. Why? Well, let me tell you the name of the panel, first of all. The panel was named Women in Comics, Creators and Characters. Well, who's going to complain about that? Well, let me read you the names of the people on the panel. Craig Glasson, Kevin Robinette, and Jason Tucker. Anybody notice anything about that? They're all men.
White men.
This was couldn't speak to that, I wasn't there.
Hold on. Kevin's a white guy. Jason, definitely was.
Down in front. This was apparently a terrible sin, and we had a post on comicsalliance.com. Certainly men can be part of the conversation about the place of women in comics throughout history and even today, but they should not be the only people speaking, nor should any panels featuring men speaking about women be given a pass because they're about the history and not diversity. Women deserve the right to speak about their own history. In the headline, Denver Comic-Con had a women in comics panel with no women. Well, that's true. But let me tell you about some of the other panels that happened at Denver Comic-Con. We had strong women in film and fiction. And the names of some of the presenters, Christy Helvig, Betsy Dornbush, Sherry Thicklin, We had that, remember that Beyond Bechdel, queer femmes and women in comics. Audrey Czar, Emily Smith, Gina Bernard. Can fandom fix tech's gender gap? The idea being that there is a huge gap in the technical professions, and can science fiction fandom help address that issue? Maybe, more majors in computer science and fewer majors in women's studies, just a guess. But this was presented by Jessica McDonald of SparkFun. Women in Comics Now, presented by Crystal Skillman, Joelle Jones, Amanda Connor. I think you get the pattern. Minority and women authors of the past. She Can Do It, Awesome Women in Comics. Girls in Geekdom, position papers and roundtable discussion on finding the feminine voice in comic culture. She Makes Comics, presented by the Denver Film Society, and Women in the Geek Industry. Every single one of those panels not only had women on them, but were dominated by women. The sin here, supposedly, was that this one panel had no women on it. And that meant that women were just not being represented. This is, of course, absurd. It's ridiculous. But when those are the voices that are being heard, it has a tendency to push the debate and the dialogue in a particular direction. And where is the pushback? As I said, this is the culture. The amount of money that is going into this industry is beyond belief. It is staggering. And that means that that's where the eyes are, that's where the ears are. And so if the goal then is to address people through culture, this is the place to do it. And that's what Len and I were doing. And that's what I really want to urge everybody to at least think about. Because when your message is comic books, that's stupid. Superheroes, that's ridiculous. Science fiction, who can believe that stuff? Well, you've just dissed everything that they like watching, reading, listening to. How much are they going to listen to you on the stuff that matters? Whereas if you point to a superhero character, say Batman, and point out, here's a guy who is taking upon himself to eliminate justice. He's got all this money. Is he giving it to the government? No. He's funding his own crusade to bring justice into the world one at a time. And, that reminds me of something that I read in Frederick Bastiat, or whatever. Whatever. However you want to get there, it's a terrific avenue. So with that said, I want to finish this out by telling you a little bit about what our point was. Now, last year we presented, as I said, Gods Among Men. It was talking about superheroes and the way that various superhero characters embody this philosophy of individualism. Well, this year we decided to come at it from the other side and talk about the villains and subtly point out the ways that some of the villains push in the opposite direction. We started off with a very simple question. What makes a villain? Paralleling what we did last year. What is it about the Joker, Lex Luthor, any of these characters that makes them bad? This is a great angle because it basically points to the questions, the fundamental questions of morality, of philosophy.